Okay, good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, October 27th, 2021, and we are back in the Pownell Elementary School. So welcome back to Pownell, guys. We didn't get out here last year, so it's good to be back. Thank you for hosting us, Lisa. We are missing a couple of folks tonight. Susanna is away, and we don't have our student rep. They're both proudly representing Freeport High School at a playoff field hockey game and a playoff boys soccer game. So good luck to all the teams playing tonight. We've got quite a few. Girls soccer also playing. So we will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so before we get into all of our stuff on the agenda, a couple of things. First, I wanted to thank both Jeremy and Lindsay for their service on the board. This is their last official board meeting before the Freeport election next Tuesday. So next Wednesday night, we will have 2 new school board members with big shoes to fill. So thank you both. You both have been invaluable in terms of just willingness to participate in the meetings and participate on committees. And so while you're not going anywhere far, I will certainly miss you both. So thank you. And just so you know, I will be stepping out potentially, if we're not done with our agenda, just a bit before 8 tonight. So in case you see me get up and race to the door and Beth to take over, it was planned. And there's nothing wrong. So anyway, so we will get started with, do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the October 13th meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions? Maura and Vali, thank you. All those in favor? Great, none opposed. Adjustments to the agenda. I think there's a few. You just turn your mic off.
Oh, thank you. So we have 4 adjustments, and it's just moving agenda items around. So I would, after 6C, good news, I'd like to move 9A, the finance report, up after the good news. Following that, I would like to move the social emotional workshop up. And then following that, I'd like to have the discussion of the calendar. And that's so our presenters do not have to stay through the entire board meeting. And I also, lastly, would like to table 13B, the discussion on the advisory and standing committees. There's still a little bit more research I need to do on that. Thank you.
And one more thing before we move on. I think in people's folders, I don't know if Jenny let people know. Are they not in there? Yeah, okay. I think there's an invitation for the ACAF grand opening for the Meeting House Arts. So I'm not sure if an email went out to folks that it came to the central office for everybody. So, but it's in your purple folders, just so you know. All right, so we will move on to good news and recognition. First, we have a golf Class B individual state champion in our midst this evening, and I think Jen is going to speak to that for us.
That's okay. It's better. Good evening, everybody. Jen Gulko, principal of the high school. I am incredibly proud to share some wonderful news about one of our students. Shared a little bit about our Class B champion, who is Eli Spalding, and Eli's here tonight with us. And just wanted to share, there's actually a lot of information about this member of our Freeport High School community. So not only was he the Class B state champion, but he was named the Junior Golfer of the Year for the state of Maine by the Golf Hall of Fame last week. And he also helped lead Freeport High School to the Class B state championship last year, but he's also had wonderful finishes in this year of 2021. He won the Maine Junior Championship. That was earlier this year. He was a Maine medalist and was 4th overall in the New England Junior Championship. He won the Maine Schoolboy Championship at Class B. He played in the High School National Championship in Pinehurst, North Carolina. He placed 9th in his first American Junior Golf Association tournament. He played in 4 Hurricane Junior Golf tournaments, and he won in Virginia and Massachusetts, plus had 2 top 3 finishes. He also played in the Maine Amateur in 2020 and 2021, which is one of the highest levels of golf. And he is also, he's not done, he is playing on Monday in the New England High School Golf Championship in Connecticut. He is a sophomore. He's a wonderful member of our school community. He also volunteers his time on the Junior Golf Committee for the Maine State Golf Association. So we are so proud of everything that Eli has done and proud to recognize him tonight.
So I have to say that Eli is also an excellent soccer player, so I was very sad to see when he left soccer, but he's clearly found his calling in golf, so I guess it's okay, but he was always an amazing team member, which I'm sure he is also on the golf team, so congratulations, Eli, that's fantastic. All right, we do not have a report from the student rep unless we can FaceTime them from the field. So we will move on to good news from the Pownell Elementary School. Lisa Demick.
Thank you, Michelle. Welcome back. Welcome to Pownell. It's nice to have you here. So I know one of the things that the board is interested in hearing about this year is the ways that we are highlighting and building student voice into what we do. So in RSU 5, we define student voice as expression of values, opinions, and beliefs that lead to choice and influence decision making. So I thought I'd highlight one of the practices that we are happy to be able to bring back this year, and that's our Principals Advisory, which is a group of 6th, 4th, and 5th graders who meet with me at lunch every other Friday to just talk about the workings of the building and ways that they can contribute to our school. So they serve to survey other classrooms around things like our celebrations. They help with problem solving and then bring forth their own ideas or ideas from their classmates. They're elected. And so I just wanted to recognize Bryce Holmes, Zach Farlow-Poor, Isabel Pocock, Lizzie Baird, Logan Curry, and Ellen McDonald, who are serving as this semester's Principals Advisory Team. So very happy to have them. Right now we're working on new rules for the pirate ship, so play can be safe. So looking forward to their input on that. Also wanted to share that we had a couple of pieces of good news around the work that we've started around outdoor education. So this summer I was approached by the Royal River Conservation Trust around a partnership for the Old Harris Road, which is right across the street, and affords us the opportunity to have sort of repeated visits to the same space. So they are working in collaboration with my 5th grade teacher and her students, Jen Winkler, to create an interpretive trail. And the 5th graders are actually going to write the interpretive trail, and Royal River is providing samples of that, and then they're putting together backpacks for the school to use with field guides and binoculars and water test kits. So we're excited to have that resource right across the street. And finally, Kelly Howard has just received word that she received a $1,500 grant for resources to augment our outdoor education. So we are really enjoying making the most of this beautiful campus. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa before? She'll be back, so don't.
No, much later, right?
Sorry. All right. So we are going to move on to finance. So 9A, and ask Rick to join us.
Good evening, everyone. Really quickly, you continue to expand at a very proper rate. I see no particular issues that require any sort of concern on the administration or the board's behalf. I did want to sort of talk very briefly about the fact that we are starting to enter into that holiday season known as budget season. And that kind of started off yesterday with a meeting that the administrators and I had talking about the budget and starting that sort of precursor to formulating the budget. And one of the things that we have talked about and started to talk about, and I put a sheet at your seats, is sort of thinking about how things are coded with regard to the budget and budget items. And one in particular is core central ideas is reflected in that one-page sheet that I've given you. Now, I'm not really going to talk about it too much tonight. I actually gave it to you for a little bit of homework, and when we see each other next time, then you can ask me some questions about it. But I assure you that this is one of those things that's going to generate some different looks during this budget season, and so therefore I'm just giving you some preparatory information so that when you see it, when we start talking about it, you'll have an idea of, and I'll remind you that this is that thing that we discussed a few weeks ago. So other than that, if you have any other questions, that concludes my report.
Any questions for Rick? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, so moving right into the social emotional presentation, and I think the presentation was emailed to the board earlier this morning, and there's also a printed copy in your package for notes, but I think they're gonna put it up on the screen as well. So, thank you. The screen's only used to Dennis's presentation because usually his goes up there. His is usually in Pownell. That's right.
Just wait for it to warm a little bit. Do we need a light off? Lisa, or do you think it's fine? Does it usually look fine when you're in here? Maybe one light. Okay. If you can't see, I would suggest you move over to this area, but all of you are presenting, so I guess you don't need to move over. This is going to be a shared effort this evening.
I might just ask that you move the mic a little closer.
Okay.
Your mask is just a little muffly.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so good evening. I am happy to begin our social emotional presentation this evening. You will hear how the social emotional needs are addressed in ways that include student voice, inclusivity, and responsive classroom. I'm just going to refresh you that the first goal in our 5-year strategic plan is to have students experience a joyful learning climate that is safe and nurturing and fosters curiosity. The first objective is to strengthen and align all socio-emotional development systems. I love that picture. In a few moments, you will hear from the elementary, middle, and high school levels, but I will first begin by sharing what is occurring at the district-wide level. There are 4 overarching areas that connect to addressing social emotional needs. The first one is policy. One example I will cite is the proposed revisions to the wellness policy that will come before you in November. Both the Wellness Committee and the Policy Committee
We're purposeful and intentional in this work to include the social-emotional goals and to revise language with an inclusive lens. The next area is the district-wide committees. Most of these committees were developed over the last 2 years that are listed on this slide. These committees engaged in thoughtful discussions, and some are making curriculum decisions with regard to wellness and equity. The third area is that of professional development. At our last board meeting, we shared information about the Lynn Lyons PLD that all our educators attended, as well as the parent night on the topic of how we address anxiety. You have already heard about, excuse me, I need my other page here, about how responsive classroom addresses the social emotional needs of our students. Jen Gulko will talk later this evening about the Integrative Inquiry. And lastly, we have the area of curriculum. Over the past few weeks, you've heard Julie and Emily share how Teachers College curriculum develops student voice from the K-5 level, at the K-5 level, and tonight you will hear more about our guidance curriculum and advisory updates. I will now turn the presentation over to Emily, who will begin at the elementary level.
Good evening. I'm excited to talk to you about social emotional learning at the elementary level, in part because, quite frankly, it's everything we do. So it's easy to think about social emotional learning as a 30-minute block that students might have on a Tuesday, but at the elementary level, and really pre-K-12, we're thinking about the ways kids are developing these critical skills from the moment they walk in the door through the end of the day. So today, think about opportunities for this. Disagreement at Foursquare, right? Was the ball on the line? Opportunity for social emotional learning. The power goes out in the middle of lunch. Opportunity for social emotional learning. In a classroom, a teacher was doing word study with a small group of kids while other students were expected to work in partnerships. Some of those partnerships had a harder time staying on task than others. The way that teacher is going to intervene with those students and also have students support one another, social emotional learning. So tonight we're going to talk about discrete pieces of this, but the piece I want to have layered is that all of the work that we do when we intervene with kids, when we don't intervene with kids, when we create opportunities that are hard for them, those pieces are all opportunities to develop these skills. If we zoom in a little bit more, many of you have heard us talk at different times about the framework of responsive classroom. To me, the strength and the beauty of responsive classroom is it really looks to meet two things, which is kids' social emotional competencies, some of which are listed, although this isn't a holistic list, and the academic competencies that we know are critical. And what responsive classroom does is give us a framework for thinking about how those two things work in tandem throughout the day. So I'm going to shine a light on a couple examples of these practices before you learn a little bit more about what our school counselors do to support this work as well. So two places that responsive classroom informs our practice. The first is around behavioral expectations and how we respond to misbehavior. I've chosen this one because this is not one we talk about explicitly a lot. Like when kids do things wrong, when they don't meet expectations, what do we do? I should say most of this work is actually before this moment, before the student has made a decision that might not align with our school values, our school expectations, and a lot of our work is proactive in nature and collaborative in nature in terms of constructing those expectations. But we know from parenting and just from life, we all sometimes don't meet the expectations in a community. So there are a couple things that we do through Responsive Classroom to support kids' development of skills through this. The first is helping kids identify the times that they need to take a break or step away. So all of our elementary classrooms have a take a break space. It's called different things. This is one classroom on the left. It's called the cooling down spot. In the music, it's called the rest spot, and it has a picture of a music rest. This is another classroom that is a take a break spot. But all classrooms have a spot that students can self-elect to use or can be asked to use or prompted to use. And in the highest functioning classrooms, students are using them. Even the teachers use them occasionally to model that sometimes we have moments when we realize we just need to sit and take a few breaths. The important thing with this is not only are we teaching kids when to recognize the point at which they need that space, but what to do when you get there, right? So we know that simply sitting in a chair is not sufficient. So you'll see in the classroom on the left, there's a variety of strategies at that spot. In some classrooms, they're on a key ring and they're hanging up. Many of them are around imagery or counting backwards or doing breath work. And the idea is we're building kids' skills, and hopefully these are things that they're transferring. So when they're playing Foursquare and there's a disagreement about where the ball was on the line and they become frustrated, they can lean on these strategies as well. The other layer is around how we respond to misbehavior in a way that builds students' social emotional competencies. One, we provide lots of opportunities for practice. So if students are expected to walk in the hallway and they don't, we just say, we'll try it again, right? And so we give them opportunities to practice the skill. When they make an error, the language we use with them is, how do we fix that? So parents often will ask about apologies, and apologies are part of that, but it's also bigger than thinking around, when we make an error, how do we reflect in a way to think about the impact on others? So empathy, social emotional skill, and then what can we do to fix that? So if I had a student who knocked artwork off the wall, what do we do? Oh, we're gonna go get a stapler. We're gonna use time from a preferred activity or come in before school, and we're gonna fix the artwork to get it back up. And then, as I talked about, the other piece is taking a break and stopping and taking some time to reflect. All of these practices are designed to help kids develop that self-awareness and self-regulation that hopefully serves them well, when they're cut off in traffic and when there are bigger challenges that they encounter later in life. Another piece that's really essential to responsive classroom, and you heard Julie and I both talk about this piece over the last month, is collaborative learning. And in responsive classroom, these are also often called interactive learning structures. The beauty is that they're embedded within our curricular frameworks with the units of study as well. So this is a place that responsive classroom and the units of study nest beautifully together. But we are creating opportunities throughout the day for kids to partner and collaborate in a variety of ways. And again, if we think about from a social emotional standpoint, we're doing a few things. First, we teach into those partnerships. Like even how to choose a partner is something that we teach. We don't just say, like, go for it, right? How do you engage in a partnership where the other person maybe isn't doing work? How can you draw somebody in, right? What are those relational skills that are helpful? We model this ourselves, so sometimes staff will do fish bowls with kids or take a group and have the kids engage in a partnership, and then the whole class is talking about, like, what did you see? What do you make of that? What can we learn for our own practice? We give kids lots of opportunities to practice all day long. So they are doing this work in every content area. This is not limited to reading and writing. They have partnerships and small group work in math and in their unit studies work. And then lastly, we create opportunities for students to reflect on how it went. And we feel like that reflection part is really important when we're thinking about kids developing these kinds of skills, so they can think about how their behavior is contributing to positive relationships with others, with them being productive, with their learning. And so that reflection piece is a really critical piece of their collaborative learning. So I'm going to turn it over to our school guidance team.
Okay, hi there. My name is Catherine Bigley, and I'm the school counselor at Pownell. Welcome.
I'm Lexi Trigiani, one of the school counselors at Durham Community School.
Natasha Huber, another school counselor at Durham Community School.
So we're going to try to give you a snapshot of a very big picture in a brief amount of time. We naturally create a climate of support and inclusion. It's just who we are and what we do and what we're trained to do. So many aspects of our work about DEI and SEL are just intertwined. It's hard to separate them and speak about them separately. Our training, we all hold a master's level degree in mental health, and we utilize counseling skills on a regular basis. We're all trained in facilitating conversation. We know how to ask important questions. We're trained in knowing how to talk about really hard topics like suicide. And we problem solve every single day. And we also know how to de-escalate situations. Much of what we do involves collaboration. So if you think about the student in the middle and a big circle, we'll start with the parents and the teacher and the support staff and the school counselor and the administrator. and maybe outside providers too. So we are all part of this big team. We do not work in a vacuum. And it's important that parents know that parenting is tricky. Raising children is hard, and that we are parents too, and that please reach out to us. Lexi's going to talk a little bit about direct and indirect services, but direct services are just what I do, like if I'm meeting with a student individually, problem solving, or my regular classroom lessons. Sorry, I'm nervous. We understand the classroom. This is really important because we teach every week, and we get in there, we know every student by name, and they know us, and they're comfortable coming to us when there's a problem. Teachers know that we're in there, and so that gives us a little more credibility that we know how to manage the classroom, and hopefully they'll treat us as a more respected and professional resource. I really enjoy the responsive classroom trainings. Thank you, I use them. And we also have a mental health pulse on the building, and we're often the first responders to a problem. And then finally, we have, we just add an added layer of psychological safety to everyone in the building. Psychological safety is a feeling that you have in a relationship with someone, and you know that that person cares about your well-being and your experiences, and it means you can have an honest and open conversation, and you feel comfortable enough to ask questions. In order to be psychologically safe, a safe person, you must be present, and we are everywhere. We're in the lunchroom, we're at recess, we're in the hallways, we're in their classrooms, so they know who we are. And we have a relationship with everyone in the building. And that's really important. Lexi?
All right, so I'm just going to talk about some of the highlights of our pre-K to 5 school counseling programs that we use, and how school counselors, how we all interact within the buildings. So you'll see we talk a lot about emotions, and with the pandemic being in the midst of it, it's really important that we recognize that and understand the impact it has on mental health. And so we know that all this work that we're doing as a school, in all the schools in this district, that it's something that's important and super helpful to students and their families and our teachers and staff too. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about weekly guidance lessons. All of our schools have, all of the elementary schools, go in and do weekly classroom lessons related to social emotional learning. And those lessons might include bullying prevention, empathy, skills for learning, personal safety lessons, and all types of social emotional learning, along with what's already going on in the classroom. And we base those lessons on the needs of the classes and on the needs of the school, and what we feel will help benefit our students the most and help support them along the way. We also offer weekly small groups and individual meetings. Again, those are based on the needs within the school. So we have conversations with teachers, with parents, with students to find out what those needs might be and how we can best support them so they can be the best learners they can be at school and be able to work through whatever's happening. Those small groups might include social skills, friendship groups, family changes, impulse control, emotional regulation, worries, and we had all the training from Lynn Lyons for the whole school district, but it also helped to kind of improve our practices as well, so we're all on the same page. And any other groups that come up along the way that we feel like students need that support with. We also provide responsive work, so those are the times of day when unexpected things happen. Maybe a student comes in with some really big things that happened outside of school the night before, or there's a huge impact on them and their families, and we really want to be there to help support those needs, whether it's their basic needs or their mental health needs. So whatever they come to school with, it's our job to help support them and help them get through that through the school day so they can access their education, but also provide other supports outside of school and give families resources to help get that extra help that they might need to help them be the best they can be in that moment. We also offer extracurricular activities and clubs. So each school might offer something a little bit different, but we all offer ways for students to connect within the community outside of school hours. So some of those clubs that we offer, some of the school counselors run some of the clubs, and also we have community members, teachers, staff that also run clubs. Some of the clubs we have at Durham Community School that we as school counselors support is a yoga club. We also have a ropes course club for team building, and we have new this year the civil rights team, and all of our schools are working on civil rights teams, and Natasha, Mrs. Huber, will share a little bit more about what that looks like in the schools at different grade levels. And so really we just want to provide extra connection, and we know that social emotional learning in those moments are really important for kids to learn and grow and feel like they have support in a community to back them up. And our last piece is providing connections and opportunities to outside resources, which I did talk about before. But these might be mental health supports that we know maybe students need beyond our scope within the school. And we recognize when students need extra support, maybe outside of school, and when families might need that support, finding a counselor that has openings, or if we're not able to connect them with counseling services we have in the school clinically, that we can help them get what they need. We also look at family needs, so just basic needs that families might need support with, and hopefully our idea is to really help support families and let them know that we're there to help and support them and their kids. So some of the community resources might be Freeport Community Services, Maine Hunger and Prevention. All of our schools have care teams where we come together as a team and find ways to help get kids what they need, get families what they need, help them feel supported and cared for. During all times, whether it's now or in the past or in the future. So we really base those needs on find services for what families need, and sometimes it might be needs that we're like, ooh, we've never come across this before. What can we do to help? Like, we want to be there to give support. So we find resources. If we don't have it already, it's our job to help make those connections. So really all of the work that we do pre-K to 5 and really beyond to 12th and beyond that is really supporting our social emotional learning and also the diversity, equity, and inclusion that we've talked about. And we've had lots of opportunities and trainings district-wide for all staff as well as ourselves. And we appreciate that support to help our families and our kids. I hope I didn't speak too long. So we're going to talk a little bit about the middle school social emotional learning. And we'll explain about our advisory, and then I'll explain more about school counseling.
Great. Thank you, Lexi. So as we sort of make this transition, although it's a slide, we know that 5th grade to 6th grade is not quite captured in one slide. And but what we increasingly try to do across the schools and within the district is to look at what do those transitions look like, whether that be entering pre-KK or transitioning to middle school. For us, it's coming upstairs potentially. For other schools, it's children going to a different building, or for Pownell to a different community. For the high school, that move from 8th grade up to 9th grade. At each of these transition areas, we sort of look at how do we recognize the developmental needs of the children as they're growing, and in this case, into early adolescence. But equally, how do we build upon the consistency and practices that they've experienced that have helped them, that have been supports for them up to that point? So over the last few years, we've been increasing the middle school involvement with responsive classroom, that some of those shifts that occur instead of morning meeting, the students have in responsive advisory meetings that have a slightly different feel to them. There's many similar structures. You heard Emily talk about interactive learning strategies, and there's still this balance between what is academically engaging and rigorous, but what is also capturing the sort of social developmental need of our students as they move through these age levels. And another aspect of that we continue to work on is language, and the sort of language that students will have experienced in their elementary classrooms, what that now looks and sounds like as they move up through the ages. So it still could be redirecting language, but the manner in which we may deliver it would be different potentially for a 7-year-old than for a 13-year-old. But it would have that same familiarity of expectation, which provides that sort of supporting structure for them.
right, and I'm lucky that I get to work pre-K to 8, so I'm going to explain a little bit about what it looks like in middle school. So this is also in our Freeport Middle School as well. All of these concepts and ideas transfer over there as well. So you will see here, there's some pictures as well, and I'll explain what those are in just a moment. But so a lot of what I'm going to talk about is very similar to what we do at the elementary level, except again, like Mr. Pinnon had explained, it's developmentally appropriate for our students in middle school. So we offer small groups and individual meetings for our middle schoolers as well. And this is also, again, based on student needs. Sometimes it's teachers, parents, and students who kind of express what those needs are, and we get a feel for what support is needed. We have social groups about anxiety, groups about executive functioning, self-esteem, mindfulness and mindsets, and restorative practices as well. So there's a variety of groups that we might have. Again, whatever the need is, we're going to find a way to help support it. We also have responsive work, like I talked about before, big things, life things that happen for students and that might present within the school day that we're not expecting or planning for. And so we have to be really flexible in the way that we work at school, knowing that we have these individual meeting times in place, group times in place, and also knowing that we might need to be flexible and find a way to support students who come in with a need for us to be able to help them through, again, so they can be at school and have their time at school, but also work through those emotional needs that they might have. We have extracurricular activities like sports and other clubs. Again, we offer the same similar clubs for middle school students as we do elementary school students, and we're lucky at DCS that we're able to sometimes intertwine those so we can have some leadership with our older kids, with our younger kids as well. So really all of this has a positive impact on their social emotional learning as they're coming together for these group activities. Our career exploration and opportunities is something to help students kind of look forward to the future. We offer career fairs. Usually we might have them at the school, but even last year we were able to have Jason Darling from Region 10 come to our school and give some information and guide students through like a virtual presentation, but he was able to be there and talk about careers. We also have other opportunities such as exploratory visits to Region 10, where students can experience more hands-on learning. So we really want to open up our middle schoolers' eyes to what's out there as they also move to high school as well. So there's lots of opportunities, and we want to share those with them. We offer community building, and that is through our advisory time and our extended advisory time, where students do some teamwork and have activities specific to what we feel is important for them and what they feel is important. And this is a time to connect. So this is where the pictures come in. So these are we have adventure days, and one of the opportunities we provide at our school at DCS, and I know at the middle school as well, they have like Kiev trips. We usually go to Bryant Pond, but this year and last year we did adventure days within our own community. And so you can see the rock on the bottom says trust. We talked about the important qualities within a team and what we need to feel successful. And so that just stood out as something like, we got to put that on there. It's trust. It's really important. That's a foundation of our social emotional work and our diversity and equity work. So let me see what else. We also provide, like I said before, field trips to Region 10 to kind of just open their eyes to see what's in our community and how those pieces can support them. Our high school planning and transition work happens from the beginning. Like when they get even in pre-K, we always talk about how they're going to move up to be 8th graders and one day move on to the high school. So kind of making their path and their plan for the future. During this transition time, it's super important to have those connections with the counselors that they'll be seeing in high school, and also to have a visit, whether it's in person or have some connection to the high school where they're going to be moving on, so they had that community connection. We also want to kind of make sure that as students move on to high school, they know that all this work that we're doing in elementary school and middle school we all have the same language and we provide the same type of support. So no matter what grade level they're at, they feel like they've had services and they have people wrapped around them to help them through their life as a middle schooler and a high schooler. And hopefully that will also help as they move on to other parts of their lives. So we provide connections and opportunities also to outside resources. It does look a little bit different actually at the middle school level, and some really big things come up and some really hard discussions happen with whether it's with students or with families and with staff. And really, our main goal is to help connect students and families to those resources, like I talked about before with the elementary school level. And again, we use a variety of the same resources, but those are all also developmentally, agencies know what the need is and what's appropriate for all levels. So that's just all of it in a little nutshell. And we are just lucky and grateful to be able to work with these students and families and to have support in doing so. And another exciting piece, Ms. Huber is going to share a little bit about our civil rights team. At our school, we work on that together, and this is a piece that is in all schools. It might look a little bit different, and everyone's maybe at different stages, but this will give you a little idea of what this looks like in our schools.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm so grateful because I get to talk about my favorite thing in the world today. So I have been involved with the civil rights team. I was previously at MLS. I recognize many of you parents from the past. There for many years advising a civil rights team there at the 3 to 5 level. And then when I got hired over at DCS, I was so excited because I got to work with middle schools in this work, which is so important and near and dear to my heart. Very passionate about the ways in which we engage our children in this type of work. So it's a school-based extracurricular activity. Our main mission is to get folks talking and thinking about issues related to these 6 pieces on the pie here. Race and skin color, national origin and ancestry, religion, disability, gender, including gender identity and expression. Sexual orientation and the language we use around that might differ at the age level. We might call it all kinds of love. We might call it all kinds of family. We just kind of go with student-led. We explain it, in ways that are age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate. So Mr. Pedden did mention that you liked specific examples, so I brought what we are working on currently, very currently. So I brought a little bag of tricks, and I brought a little, just wanted to mention Brandon Baldwin is an amazing advocate and works incredibly hard in the state of Maine out of the Attorney's General Office of Attorney General in Augusta, and he is the director of this project for the entire state of Maine. He and everyone that works on this, all the advisors, are getting together on November 4th, so I'm inviting you all to a party as well. November 4th is our day of welcome, so that is very exciting for our students. We are preparing for the day of welcome, which happens on November 4th. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this very well, but our 5th graders were so excited about being able to make an announcement about the day of welcome. So they've planned out Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of what they are going to say. And I just thought it was adorable and meaningful and powerful, and I just thought it was great that you could actually see they were working on it. It says, "We would like to inform you to please wear the color orange on November 4th for the all welcome celebration. So be ready to show the school how welcoming we can be from the civil rights team." And we also have buttons and stickers that we are working on putting together, and so it has the information about the civil rights team and the 6 categories in which we do our work. One distinction I will make between the civil rights team and general like anti-bullying or anti-discrimination or kindness work is the fact that we don't shy away from courageous conversations, and that is something I'm so grateful that you all have been so supportive of providing teachers and staff the opportunity for professional development around those courageous conversations in these areas. It has made me personally, being new in Durham, made me feel very connected to my staff. We've gotten to work in smaller think tanks around different scenarios that are extremely challenging, and there's no right answer, but there sure is a lot of work to be done around it, insight to be gained, and baby steps towards finding out how we can all work together and have such different beliefs. So the other thing I just wanted to show you, I kind of give you an overview, but in kind of our fifth grade, I do want to say that it looks different, a little bit different in the younger grades, because a lot of it is really just building the concepts, infusing the vocabulary and the language, and differentiating kindness versus advocating for civil rights. So we did a really great lesson, and yes, they intertwine and yes, they overlap, but sometimes you're not kind when you need to be standing up for what's right. So we do a lot of that, and so then today we had, do you think that school should be, we had a whole lesson about everything, and we have a lot of really awesome resources also from Brandon Baldwin, and I can't say enough about how much I have learned from specifically just being trained in the advising of the civil rights team. It's amazing. And I just want to kind of point out a couple of these that are really great. So these are third graders, and do you think everyone at school, or do you think that school should be a place where everyone feels welcome for who they are? Yes, because you shouldn't be judged about who you are. I love that people can be how they are, which I just think is wonderful, and I think that that's just really powerful. I like this one, yes, because it's awesome to be different. Our differences, like my cousin who has autism, is what makes us special. Just being able to name the different concepts and the different ways in which children understand within these 6 categories is so meaningful to me, and it makes my job and my work just something that I look forward to every single day. I also love that they can kind of, they see somebody and wow, I didn't even talk about this stuff when I was growing up. We shied away from so many conversations around this, and I admit that to them. And I say, I didn't get to talk about this stuff when I was younger, and now, guess what? I get to talk about it all the time. So I think they're grateful and appreciative to know, maybe I might have some information, and I'll be able to, kind of hold my own, and I have this insight, and it's really quite wonderful. One thing I will say, just really last thing, middle school is awesome. It is a well of untapped advocacy, and it is ferocious, and it is it is amazing, and I love it. Our kids, and they have this amazing potential for leadership, and this has given them such a voice in these matters and such a avenue to pursue these things that they're so passionate about. So that's all I will say about that. Yep. All right, thank you so much.
I forgot I was next because I'm just enthralled by what the guidance counselors accomplish every day. They never get to plan their days. And when the power goes out and you can't go outside for recess, it's a busy day to be a guidance counselor. I had a student walk in late today, and I just checked in with him, and I said, what was going on this morning? And he said, my anxiety was so bad, but I knew that if I didn't come here today, it would be twice as hard tomorrow. And I knew exactly who had been coaching him. It was our guidance counselor. Their work is essential to what we do in our schools, so they deserve a lot of praise. And I get to talk about clubs, which may make you want to be a middle schooler, But at the same time, like, no one wants to go back and be a middle schooler. This is an incredibly complex time for our young people as they learn who they are, what their role is, not just in our community, but in the world. And so one of the things that we aim to do is provide as many outlets as possible so that they can find not just their voice, but their place. And I think when we talk about responsive classroom, I think what boils down for me, and I think for us at the middle school, is just how important relationships are. It's at the crux of responsive classroom, and I think one of the things that we attempt to do in providing these outlets for clubs that are outside of the classroom is allow students to build relationships with their teachers. At the same time, allowing them to advocate for themselves. So I'm not going to talk about every club here, but the last two clubs, Outing Club, Best Buddies, those are really new. So the Outing Club came down to a teacher who really liked to get out, and some students who I have a feeling if they were at Pownell, this year, they would be writing the description for the interactive trails. And so they got together, they created a club, and they just took their first trip to Hedgehog Mountain, where they're learning about how to be just sustainable as outdoors people here in our community and the greater state of Maine. The Best Buddies program has been incredible. It's where our special ed program is partnering with students that are not identified as special education students, but who can play vital roles in supporting some of our students in our life skills programs. They just started a Friday coffee bar where teachers can place orders preemptively for coffee and baked goods, and then they're working early on Friday mornings to basically run a store, and they're turning a pretty good profit. So we had a student recently who just was not seeing themselves as an academic. We got them tutoring in our life skills program, and within 1 month, their math grades went up nearly 0.5. That's confidence right there. Like, that's just seeing yourself as a student. And that's one of the things I think we're able to do in providing these outlets and helping our young people figure out who they are. So we also need to figure out who we are as educators. And I think if we're going to be strong teachers, we need to continue to be strong learners. So that's what we aim to do in our professional development. I'm going to talk just quickly about some of the things that we've been attempting to do as we learn more about social and emotional and equity and the importance in our education system. So I don't think that anxiety and stress started with the pandemic, but we certainly got a nice we got a nice kick there. And we found out that as teachers, we need to be there for ourselves, right? You need to put your air mask on yourself first and really support each other in our social and emotional needs. So when we're talking about how we're supporting our students, it's also how do we support ourselves as adults who are going to be there for our young people. So we really delved into the why. I think last year was huge for really researching and reading. We had book groups, we had discussion groups. We knew that the work we were aiming to do is important, but to actually identify why it's important, I think is essential for moving forward and talking about the how and the what are we gonna do. We've partnered with Integrative Inquiry, which trains teachers and educators to be leaders in engaging in courageous dialogue. So Ray Grogan, who's not here tonight, he was trained in this program with a group of our teachers. This afternoon, they ran PD, they ran professional development, and it was all team building that is going to enable us to engage in those courageous conversations, those difficult conversations, that I think we all want to do, but we need help and support, and that's what we're doing right now and how we actually go about that. We partnered with Equity Maine. Most recently, we had an incredible speaker from Equity Maine at the middle school who really was able to identify for us what it was like to be a student in middle school who didn't associate with the gender that was assigned with them at birth. It was a safe space and one in which teachers could ask any type of question. That was an incredible resource and an opportunity that really impacted our roles as educators the very next day as we grapple with how do we support students who are struggling with those types of issues. Learning for Justice, until recently, it was actually referred to as the Teaching for Tolerance program. But I think of this as kind of a playbook for, if you see something, say something, but what is something? Like what do you need to address and how do you need to address it? Are you interrupting people in the hallways or at the cafeteria? And how do you do that in a way that people's defenses aren't going to just go up? How do you seek to educate? How do you seek to learn justice, but also seek for tolerance? And all the while, I think our classroom materials that we're utilizing in not just our libraries, but all of our classrooms, we're evaluating in which ways they can cater to the social and emotional needs of our students. And recently, or as of right now, it's our social studies curriculum that's under district review. So that's just a glimpse of how we are seeking to educate ourselves. It's vital work, and I think it's an incredible opportunity that staff is getting to utilize in their instruction the very next day. Thanks. I'm going to pass it off to Jen.
So I'm going to share some of our current work at the high school, and I think my pre-speech is that I think we could give a workshop on each of these things that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to try just to add some of the nuances of what we've done at the high school, because a lot of what I would talk about are things that have already been mentioned by the team. The incredible work that our guidance counselors do, that we are growing our civil rights team. We will also participate in the Day of Welcome. And so a lot of the things that they've mentioned are things that I would also build upon. But I'm going to try to kind of capture some of the things maybe that are unique to the high school. And so I think, as many of you know, we have had our own strategic plan at the high school since 2015. It's something that our leadership team has come together every year they developed it from scratch in 2015, and then every year we review it and think about the action steps that are long-term and the action steps for that particular school year. And so our 5-year plan was up. We actually decided that there was no strategic plan police, and we made it a 6-year plan because of the pandemic. And then this summer, we created our new strategic plan, which is 2021 to 2026. And we have a board meeting next week where I will present my goals that are tied to the strategic plan and go into more details. But thinking about social emotional learning and how it's integrated in, just as Emily said, into so much of what we do. There are 3 main elements of our strategic plan and what we are actively working on every day at the high school that I think tie closely to this, which is our goals around equity and inclusion, building community connections, and then our systems of support for learning and growth. So I'll just talk briefly about some of the highlights and some of the action steps of what we're hoping to work on this year. And so for equity and inclusion, our overall goal is to create a safe and inclusive environment where each and every one of our students feels positive about their personal identity, and also develops the skills that they can have conversations and understand and consider perspectives that are diverse or very similar or very, very different from their own. And so we are trying to increase opportunities for our students and our staff to engage in conversations about personal identities, about all of the things that pertain to the systems of equity and inclusion at our school, and how we can build things that make each individual feel supported at school. And that includes, as Connor talked about, professional development for our teachers, and how do they lead these conversations, how do they provide these opportunities, as that's something that we want to continue to grow. And so this year we actually have a new faculty leader team. This is our 4th faculty leader team, and this is our equity team. And these are 6 individuals plus me. And the 6 are people who volunteered to be a part of this, who wanted to really have additional training and lead the work for our staff and our students tied to equity and inclusion. The other element that's new this year is the Student Leadership Committee, which I've spoken about a little bit before, which is students who applied to be a part of that, and they represent all of the grade levels. And they are kind of our think tank, very similar to what Lisa Demick was talking about here in Pownell. And then some of our clubs, such as, we have so many clubs, as Connor talked about, which I'll show you in just a second, but 3 that really come to mind when we're talking about real direct conversations about equity and diversity and inclusion are our civil rights team, our GSA, and RSVP, which is Reducing Sexism and Violence program, which is tied to Maine Boys to Men. And so some of the things that we are also doing in addition to development at school is that we're trying to give our staff members opportunities to participate in workshops or school visits, things that are provided outside of our district as well as within our district. So some of our professional development, our leadership team designs together, and something that has worked really well for our administrative team is sharing our plans. So we have done a lot of similar professional development workshops for our teachers that Durham has done, pieces of what the middle school has done, and that's been really helpful in thinking about how we develop our own workshops. And then one of the things that we've talked about consistently is how do we help our students access things? Because our students come from diverse families and backgrounds, how are we making sure that we are eliminating barriers? That's something that we talk about pre-K to 12, but we talk about it at a lot of high school. And so that things such as co-curricular activities, that all of our students have the ability to participate in those things. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit too. So Connor talked about this. I'm going to just give a little bit more detail about Integrative Inquiry, what this was. This was the consultant, Kate Stitham, who helped us to lead our student forum that was in the spring of 2020. And this is her company. And so there were 19 of us that participated in a 2-day workshop. And then it also includes individual coaching, where the goal is to help all of us who engaged in this workshop to lead courageous conversations amongst students or staff. It was things that we're going to continue to practice. It's not something that we learn how to do perfectly in a 2-day workshop. But all of us, the part of the program is that we all go out and practice this facilitation and then get feedback on that, which is hopefully something that's going to be very, very useful to us. And then our team at the high school, there were 7 of us out of the 19 that were from the high school. And that our first work will be leading discussions with all of our students in all of our advisories for the 4 grade levels. And that's happening at the end of November and December. This is actually the wrong title up at the top. I'm sorry. This is supposed to say Community Connections. And so for Community Connections, it's something that we also feel that that's a really important part of our students' development. And I think that at the high school, we feel very well supported by the 3 communities. And we also want our students to be able to engage with community members in lots of different ways, such as internships or job shadowing. Our mentor program has continued to grow, which has been phenomenal. And again, trying to eliminate those obstacles to student access. We're trying to make really distinct connections between what we're teaching at the high school and the connections to real world. And I would say a silver lining from the pandemic is the ability to connect with so many different people virtually, that we're able to have guest speakers or just, kind of quick connections, mentorships, things that we can do virtually that would have been much harder to do in person. So that's one of the things that has really helped our connections with community. And then this one's supposed to say support for learning and growth up at the top. And so a big part of this is our advisory program, which we have continued to develop. And I think most of the board members have heard me talk about that. Our advisory program at the high school has really been predominantly academic focused. And we're trying to shift that pendulum. Not all of our high school students love that. They are not all super excited about social emotional lessons or topics or things like that. Others really enjoy it. But we have made a commitment as a school that this is something we want to support them academically, but also personally. So something that we brought back this year that we did pre-pandemic was that on Wednesdays, our students don't go anywhere. They stay in their advisory. So they don't go to callbacks for additional academic support. They don't go to club meetings. The only thing that they do is either a grade-wide event, if we had a guest speaker, or some other sort of event that's just for one of the grade levels. We don't fit all together, even before the pandemic, in the FPAC, so we don't do whole school assemblies anymore. Or it can be a lesson that happens for the whole school. So we watched that movie last year about social media that was brought to the district, and then had discussions about that. And then there's some advisory choice. That was something that we heard both from staff and from students, that they wanted to have the ability to choose what their advisory was going to do together. And so that can look very different. It can look like going to the Zen room as a whole advisory. It can be walking into town together. It can be reading an article and discussing it. It looks very, very different from advisory to advisory. But another thing that we added this year was that we now, and this is very new, we now have advisory student leaders. It's almost like a TA for the advisory. And so this is a student who has chosen to be the leader for their advisory. And then throughout the week, there might be different things that they do in the first 10 minutes when we have connections in advisory, but they will also be helping to plan and lead activities that the advisories are doing on Wednesdays. So they had their first meeting last week, and they all gave input on what they would like to see. When we talk about how different the pre-K to 12 kids are, lots of our kids want to play board games, so not that different. Some of them want recess, not that different. And so, giving our students a lot more voice in what that looks like in advisory. But also when we talk about those nuances of social emotional learning, there are 10 advisory leaders per grade level, and those 10 are going to have to talk to one another, communicate, figure out what's going to be an effective lesson for their grade level to do. Are they going to agree or disagree? And that's where we see tons of social emotional learning right there. Another thing that we did that is new this year that is working really well is that we have co-advisors for all of our 9th grade advisories. So that means our guidance counselor, some of our other staff members who were part-time or kind of all different situations have paired up. And now there's 2 adults in that room with all of our 9th grade advisories, which makes a big difference in how they're participating in activities. We are working to use those student leaders, which I'll talk more about in a second, to do different roundtable discussions with our students throughout the year. And some of those will be completely peer-led, so there won't be an adult there. Some of them will have an adult facilitator who's helping. And it's really a chance for students to engage in conversations, lots of different ones, anything from things about their personal identities and then how our school is supporting that or not supporting it. What are things that we can be doing better? And then the top bullet, Connor mentioned this a little bit. We learned a lot about staff wellness last year, about how important that is. We had a wonderful day last year where different staff members elected to teach something to other staff members. So we had painting, bread making, sewing, pickleball, and staff had the chance to choose what was best for their wellness. And that's something that we're carrying forward with us, as Connor said, that it's so important that we're helping our staff to take care of themselves right now too. We are incredibly grateful for the support from the board to increase our social work services at the high school, plus the funding for the pandemic that we are now at 2 full-time social workers. And it's already made an incredible difference of what our full-time general ed social worker is able to do. She's now able to attend, she attends the civil rights team meetings, she attends the GSA meetings, she's pulling in students for groups. Those are just things that we weren't always able to do when we had one social worker for our 600 kids. And so that is something that we really hope to continue and expand upon what her role looks like at the high school. And we have a ton of kids accessing her. She went to all of the beginning of the year grade level meetings because some students had given feedback that they didn't know who she was and how to access her, and just to make her more visible in the school. And now she's very busy. And then we have kids that are scheduled through their IEPs, but then it's just expanded our ability to see kids on a drop-in basis, which has been a huge support. I won't go over all of our clubs. You can see we have an excellent, we have a new herpetology club that started today, study of lizards and bugs, which I said they could not come into the building. They could just study pictures of them or in a tank. That was the rule today. But really, we think that this is a great way for students. As Connor said, I won't go into depth about that, but I think you just see an absolute different side of students when they are in a different environment, or a leadership role, or a club of students with similar interests. You also see a huge range of kids, and so they are students who might not interact any other time except in this club meeting, and I think that that's a huge part of their development and their social engagement. And we are continuously trying to think about opportunities for student leadership, because I think that that's another place where we support our whole community, but also the development of our students. We really are trying to prepare them for whatever comes after high school for them, and leadership roles are a big part of that. So now we have 40 students who are the advisory student leaders, some of them who've never led anything before, and it's given them a new opportunity to try some leadership in a safer way. We have our student council, we have our class officers, the student leadership committee, there's 16 members of that. We have our 2 school board representatives, both of who are phenomenal. And then we have our club leaders and our athletic teams and our peer mentors. And so feeling like this is a really important part of our school culture, and then talking about how do we increase their opportunities to talk about their needs and what they think that the school is doing well and what we can be doing better. So with that, I think we are open for questions for any of the grade levels. And thank you so much, and hope that this was an informative presentation.
Oh, this was an informative presentation. So much information. So first, I'm going to start with a thank you, a huge thank you, because I know this takes a ton of time and effort on everybody's part to pull these together, never mind to actually execute on all these things every day. So thank you very much for the presentation, but more importantly, for doing all of these things for our kids and our families. So I'm sure there are questions and comments from the board. But I'm going to let Beth field them.
Question? Oh, Maddie.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. It's just a pleasure to meet those of you we haven't necessarily heard from before, and just to hear how it feels like this is really comprehensive throughout the district, which just makes me really just happy and proud of all of you. So thank you. I just had a couple quick thoughts. One is clubs at the high school are so amazing, and I'm always hearing about how it's kind of hard. I hear this from students and I hear it from parents. It's hard to get freshmen to do clubs. Oh, you don't have, I mean, I'm not necessarily going to ask a question. Thanks. And I hear it from the parent perspective is, well, you know, high school is a big deal. It's a big academic leap, and they kind of want to get their feet under them first. And then, you know, they don't necessarily ever say yes to it again, like if they miss that opportunity. So I just wanted to sort of put that pin in there for those of you who are preparing the 8th graders for coming up, to talk about clubs and to get more high school kids down to talk about clubs and how, I mean, that ability to find belonging in a little niche environment that you already have an interest in is huge. And I'm a big believer in it, because when we moved to this district, my son was a new freshman from Texas, which was weird. So it helped him so much to say yes to clubs. I just wanted to say that. I do I do have a question for you, Jen, though, sorry. I mean, I don't know that there's much of an answer or not, but I wonder about counseling services that are more around needs around therapy needs or support systems at the high school beyond the sort of college preparatory stuff. I know we have thank goodness we have 2 full-time social workers now, but how do we see sort of the continuation of the kind of support that happens in middle school and elementary school and the high school in a way that's similar? 'Cause sometimes that feels like a shift, like you go into like career in college.
That's a great question. I mean, I think that it depends on the elements of the guidance department, really, in conjunction with the social workers. They work very, very closely. And our nurse is someone who's really, really active with our kids in terms of both their physical health and their mental health. And so it's not, we kind of say that there's 3 pieces to the pie of what the guidance counselors do. It's their current academic progress, it's their college and career exploration, and then it's their personal development. So our guidance counselors spend a huge amount of time working with students, talking through their family challenges, personal challenges. We have, same thing, it's some of the challenges that face the pre-K to 5 kids just manifest differently. Friend group challenges is a big one in 9th grade. You come in with these friends from one school, and then you meet all these other kids, and then somebody doesn't talk to somebody. The challenges of social media are just flabbergasting. Of pretty much every challenge that we have in a negative way is somehow tied to social media right now. So that is a huge part of what our guidance counselors are doing. They have pulled together some groups, so we don't do that as much as the younger grades do. Sometimes it's hard to get the students to participate in those, and we always want that to be voluntary, but that is something that they do. They do a ton of mediations. Charlie Mellon and I do those as well. We let students choose. Do you want your guidance counselor to mediate? For some kids, they want me to be the one who mediates, and so that's where they're having a conflict with the student. I just say, we're going to make sure you both have a voice. And so that is a huge part of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Counseling for anxiety, we were all on the Lynn Lyons train a long time ago. That's a verb that we use at the high school. We call it Lynn Lyonsing someone, means to like help them through their anxiety and get them back to class. But that kind of one thing that we are very specific about is that we have had some people who are way more in-depth therapists come to school as consultants, and that has not worked out well. That does not work to have deep therapy and then send them to math, and so what we do is really try to work hard to connect with parents to say that our social work and guidance services are about helping students access their education during the day, and I think your student needs more than that, and here's some connections and things like that. So that's what we try to do.
That's great, thank you.
The first question, too, we try to make the mentors drag the freshmen to club meetings. I specifically tell them that they need to do that. But it's a great point of some kind of club fair or something. We haven't done that for the 8th grade. We do it for the 9th graders, and it's definitely a good idea that we could do that.
Just with the transition work that the high school counselors do with the middle schoolers, I know especially last year they really tried to highlight and talk with them about the balance between picking classes that are right for them and having that time to take care of their mental health needs and to make those connections and have some club time. So I know that was something that they were really working on last year with our students, even more so to help them pick the classes that were right for them and also give them an idea of all the clubs that were available. In the past, there was a senior project where a student came down and met with some of our students and did a group and shared all the clubs and gave tours of the school. So it would be awesome if we could try to connect and continue that type of work. So it's helpful to hear that and figure out ways to kind of improve that for the students as they transition.
Jen?
First of all, thank you. That was a great presentation, as always. The last board meeting, it was brought up too about the courageous conversations and the courageous dialogue, and I'm really fascinated by that. And I think that one thing that I know parent presentations and things like that aren't very well attended, but I think the connection to the home with that would be really helpful, because I know that parents struggle very much with having conversations with their kids about tough things. I mean, me included. And, I think we can all remember times that we've been, as a parent, in a pickle about how to talk about something. So I think parents would really welcome that. And I also think on the flip side is, letting parents know, because I think in some families that's not something that's going to be as well received. So I think to make the community aware of that work that you're going to be doing around that would be great, and to also offer support to parents with that. Because I certainly know that, I've been in plenty of situations with my kids where we just, you kind of don't know where to go with a conversation. And I'm kind of jealous that all of you are getting the training on that. But I think you should share the wealth and offer some stuff to the families as well. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Vali?
Thank you. I echo what everyone said. That was amazing. I have a couple of questions that arose as a result of your responses to other board members' questions. One of them is privacy. How do we deal with the privacy at the middle and high school when a student shares information that is important for maybe the family to know about, or maybe not? What are the parameters that are used, and how do you guys define what should be shared with the family and what shouldn't be shared with the family?
I can share for my staff that, particularly for the social workers, is that whatever a student talks about is confidential unless that student is going to hurt themselves, hurt someone else, or is being hurt. And other than that, then it's confidential what they talk about. If it's conflicts with another student that's going to come into the building, that's different. And so that's something that they talk about. Do you feel like you can report that? How can we report that anonymously? So it might be sometimes that it comes to us that way, but that's the general guideline. The guidance counselors could speak to that, probably.
Briefly, I know with the elementary and middle school, we often will process something emotional or sensitive and just, question whether, do your parents know about this? How much, what did they say about this? What did your mom say about this? What did your dad say about this? Whoever. Sometimes that relationship is strained, and sometimes it isn't like something that is going to be helpful to even, ask them that question. You still do, just to see, gauge where it's, where their parents stand with it. But the same thing, as long as, the confidentiality, as long as they're not being harmed, we basically try to build that trust so that they can feel free to express themselves and open up and go deeper if they need to, or, have that trusted adult in the building that isn't their parent, which I know doesn't sound fair, and I know it doesn't sound like always the most intuitive, but if there is something, a red flag, any type of thing where we can see a potential for harm, we will always encourage or check with the child, hey, can we call home about this, or can we, check in about this? And so that's really, we'll really try to put, unless it's something that is clear and imminent danger, we will probably most likely encourage the child to speak up, and then we'll follow up. How did that go? Did you have that conversation with your mom or your dad? And then also sometimes they just want you to call, at least at our sometimes they're like, hey, could you call and tell them about that? Sure, yeah, it's, it's our pleasure. So, yeah, anything else that you would like to add?
Or we can call together, especially with little ones.
Come to the mic, thank you.
Especially, I'm here at Pownell, and it's pre-K through 5, so with the little ones, parents need to know. And so I'll say, do you think your mom or dad would want to know about what we talked about today? And 9 times out of 10, they're like, yes. I'm like, do you want me to call? Do you want to tell them together? And then we just decide together. but with little ones, parents need to know.
Dolly.
Yeah, the other question I had, in terms of financial resources for support, mental health support outside of the school, especially at the high school, where Jen mentioned that the role of the guidance counselors and the social workers is mostly to enable the students, to go to the classrooms and be academically successful, but not necessarily do the deep mental health work that they may need. Not every family can afford that. Is there any financial support for families whose students need that help and cannot necessarily afford it?
So our social workers or guidance counselors or nurse really try to connect them through main care. They try to find, we used to work with the organization Day One, and so they could take on some of the students pro bono. That is not the case right now. More than financial assistance, the trouble is the wait list right now, that there are just unbelievable waits to be seen by a counselor. It seems to have gotten a little bit better this year than it was last year in terms of being able to get student support. But they really just try to rally and find whatever support. We as the district don't support that. We don't help them financially to have outside counseling, but they really try to find whatever services they can. And then there's some organizations that will do some free counseling services. That's a little bit different than like deep therapy though.
And sorry, stay there, Jen. One more question.
I'm just gonna stay, I'll just stay and then I'll just welcome other people up.
So based on the amazing presentation, I have a very firm understanding of how all students access tools on how to self-help at the elementary grade, but it sounds as though when they get to the middle and high school, they don't have the guidance counselors come into the classroom, they don't have the small groups, they don't have all those added supports that are more appropriate for younger students. So is the role of the something in the curriculum like health teacher to do that, or how do students who are older get the reinforcement and support that they may need to continue to learn how to self-regulate and all those things?
Yeah, that's a really good question. All of our students are required to take health. A huge part of health curriculum is about decision making, positive decision making. And so kind of all of the topics, probably when we were in high school and we were just memorizing all of the things about health, it is then tied to how do you make positive decisions about things about your physical wellness or substance use or things like that. So that's one way, but that's only a semester in high school. And then, we don't have a place in the curriculum where that would be there. It's more about building connections with kids than it is about teaching those kind of those real discrete skills. I think that what we teach a lot is about self-advocacy. So we talk, our advisors talk about that a lot, like when you need help, where do you go? And so our guidance counselors, our advisories are divided alphabetically so that they all those kids in the room have the same guidance counselor. So our guidance counselors do go into advisories. It's not as much as doing lessons, though that was something that they started in the spring right before the pandemic. They went into all of the sophomore advisories and they had a lesson about that. It was more about taking care of mental health and advocating for yourself when you need help. So it's not as formalized as the lesson plans at the younger grades, but it's definitely something that we think about and talk about a lot with individual kids. All of our kids meet with their guidance counselors, and when they're doing academic support, they're also checking in on like, how are things going? We talk a lot about friendships or connections. And so that's a place where they're learning those things, but that's an area where we could definitely enhance. Hopefully if advisory turns where we're really in a place where it becomes more of an advisory curriculum just than academic support, those are the places where it would be.
Yeah, that sounds great. I really like that idea because being a parent of students who have graduated or are in high school, middle school, I have noticed that the emphasis on mental health has increased in the recent years, especially at the elementary grades, which is wonderful. But it means that the older students may not have been exposed to all that, and they may be a little behind in their learning on how to access the tools that they need. So even though we assume that everyone has those skills, they don't necessarily, because they may have missed that. So especially as we transition students through the high school, I think it's important to keep reinforcing those messages.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Does Connor or Will would like to speak to the middle level?
Can you tell Becky we'd be happy to? We can wait if you want to just. Yeah, in the middle, for us in middle school, there's a couple of pieces to it, actually, Valley. We do still, it's actually kind of what Jen was just saying. So through advisory, we have sort of like a week-long focus each week. And some of those may be around just being a middle school in terms of organization or involvement, but they could be about trust, or they could be about friendships. And that theme runs through each week. Then we also continue to do our sort of informal risk screeners right through 8th grade, which also flags sort of social emotional concerns that may exist from either intrinsic or extrinsic concerns or questions. And then guidance. There's conversations all the time about individuals who might need that more specific instruction and support. So we sort of provide broad connections for kids right the way through 8th grade, but then it's in advisory each day. And then more specific sort of universal screeners, and then there's still groups that meet with our guidance teams. So there's that messaging continues on, also within that sort of health curriculum component too. So. Oh, sure.
Just as Will's talking to, I also think that a little bit more in the middle school level, we try to incorporate that experiential piece too. So between the field trips or those experiential pieces of what the students kind of need and how they can grow and help them in their future too is part of what we add into that as well. So I think we spend time doing that with the younger kids too, but I think there's other opportunities where students can get connected to other resources within the community to help them along the way. Does that make sense? Okay.
I think it's already been said, just to add on to what Will said, that we are periodically assessing risk as teachers, both externalized behaviors, internalized behaviors, and the internalized ones are a lot harder to assess. But we meet weekly as teams, and the first thing is kid talk. The first thing is, who are we worried about? We don't expect middle schoolers to always raise their hand when they're struggling. Our health teacher is also collaborating with our guidance counselor. So lessons and units in 6th grade health right now are being co-created with our guidance counselor. But your other question about supporting students who may not come from families with as many resources, and this is not always the case, but I think when a student does have main care, we can sometimes work faster to match them with the resources that they need. I didn't do that. So we're constantly kind of. Great question, Valley. We're all the while always working with outside resources to see who can actually get those services in place fastest. But I think right now, if a student has private insurance, that's what I'm finding is taking the longest in terms of matching with therapy.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Maddie.
Sorry, Jen, it's that time of year where I have to bring it up again. So, for those of you who've been on the board with me for any length of time, I'm a huge fan of Challenge Day, which is something that we used to do with the freshman class. What I loved about that program specifically was the empathy building and real team building, great way to come into a new school for kids to really understand with that cross the line exercise, which some of you have heard about, to really understand some of the hardships and the difficulties that their peers are going through. So I think pre-pandemic there was a plan in place to replace it with something other than the LL Bean outing, so I'd love to hear if that's still in the works.
So that's the RISE program that we were developing. That's the same woman who's doing Integrative Inquiry. So because of the challenges of the pandemic, the whole structure of that RISE was about, I think you've also heard me say many times that our concern, as well as when I've been speaking to the other principals in Cumberland County, the concern was that we all really struggled to make Challenge Day be something that was long-standing and impactful to our community beyond that day. For some kids it was, for some kids it wasn't. And so the idea of the RISE program would be something we would do every year. But the whole kind of foundation of that was 5 schools coming together. I was talking with Yarmouth, Falmouth, Cape, Greeley, and Mount Ararat about coming together, using our funding, training our kids together. And so the pandemic put a giant stop on that. And then this year as well, we're just not mixing our kids in that same way. We're not visiting each other's schools in the way that we had hoped. But it's definitely something that we've talked about. But what we've decided to do right now, because it's something that we can do, is this work in our own advisories. So the work that's starting about having conversations, that's going to be in all 4 grade levels. And having these conversations about identities and then personal identities. How do identities interact? How do we respect those diverse perspectives and experiences? So my hope is that we're not waiting for this program to start, that we're doing that starting this coming month. And then the kids will have a voice. The RISE program was all about kids having a voice and not having an outside consultant kind of come in and do a program. It was that they would develop it. And so that's the hope moving forward, that whatever we do, that the kids have a say in how that's designed and that it's for all 4 grades. And we hope to go to LL Bean. I think that was another a very different experience, but very powerful for some kids in a different way than other kids. It's the same thing, It's like half of them love the prom DJ and half of them hate the prom DJ. It's kind of that split of, what speaks to one student doesn't speak to another. And so I'm hopeful that we're going to do these things that become part. It's not just kind of a one-off one day, but become a part of our culture, and that's what we're really trying to build. But so we're working very closely with Kate, who has helped us to do multiple things, including she has kind of shifted to this situation of helping to train staff who then go out and have these conversations, and we're looking at doing that for kids. Dr. Foley and I have talked about that in a different way too.
Thank you very much, Jen.
I forgot one thing that I wanted to mention is this coming Wednesday, we have, which is really important to this topic, is we have the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey that all of our students take. All high schools take this in the state of Maine. And it's the data that I have presented to the board. And so it's very telling about what our students are struggling with in terms of all different things, from substance use and abuse to their mental health status. And so that was, again, something we did right before the pandemic. We got the data in February of 2020 and had great plans about what we were going to do with that data. And so the kids will take the survey this coming week, and then we usually get the data in January or February, and then I'll share that with the board and share, what our hopes are of what our action steps will be, because we take that data and directly turn that into action steps of how we can support our students.
Thank you very much. All right, Jill.
I wasn't going to ask because of the time, because I know you all have worked a really long day. But again, I just was wondering, I'm very thankful that we are a district that saw the need for more social work services and provided it with 2 at the high school. How much time do those 2 social workers give to regular education students after you look at 504 plans and IEP minutes?
So one of the social workers is dedicated to students with an IEP, and one is dedicated to students who are in the general ed population.
And the one that's dedicated to the general ed population, do they also provide services if someone with a 504 plan would need social work services?
Yes, that's pretty rare that we would put social work services in a 504 plan. That's usually something more that you would see as part of an IEP plan. It's not to say that that doesn't happen, but it's something sometimes in a 504 plan will be things that are provided to all of our students in terms of accessing the social work.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think you're done, Jen. I think that's it, right? Everybody? Okay. Thank you all very, very much for that. Okay, we're going to move on to the calendar. That would be 12A, correct?
Yep. Do you want to do the motion first?
Oh, wait, yes. Okay, so can I have a motion for consideration and approval to revise the 2021-2022 school year calendar as follows? The first 3 weather-related no school days will be made up at the end of the school year. Any remaining weather-related days will be remote learning days and will not be made up at the end of the year in June. All right, Vali and Maura, thank you. All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Becky for some explanation.
So based upon your feedback last time, I went back to the administrators and they spoke to their leadership teams in each of the schools. And so this is supported by the staff. That was one of the questions. And I think the other question was, what will this look like? And it really will be more like the Blizzard bags or the Google Classroom. So it will not be a full day of synchronous learning. Part of that is because, you know, we might have a power outage on that day. So, so this is what we're still recommending after checking in with the leadership teams, that we do 3 real snow days that we make up, and that would have us ending school on Thursday, June 16th. And that any other days beyond that we would be utilizing Google Classrooms, and that teachers would be available for support, but it would not be the synchronous learning that we had last year.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Vali?
Thank you, Becky. So my question is, when you say that they're Blizzard bags or Google Classroom, will this be something that is following the sequence of the curriculum that is being taught, or is it something that teachers will prepare 3 months in advance and then just pre-distribute in the case there is a storm day?
No, I don't. You know, look, I made all the administrators stay here for a little longer. So I'll give it my first stab, but I don't see this necessarily something that we do 3 months in advance. I think Emily's going to speak to it at the elementary level, and then I'll have Jen kind of talk a little bit at the high school level.
Yeah, I don't see it as an either or, so I anticipate that we won't prepare anything yet, right? We'll wait and see how the winter starts off. And if we get to that place where we've had a snow day, then we'll start thinking around what assignments would fit within the units kids are doing right now. So it may be that in math, they're getting materials for math games they've been playing in recent weeks. If they're in an opinion writing unit, that they're doing opinion writing. So not something that gets created in October, but likely also not something that gets created the night before. At the elementary level, we do still use Google Classroom. We just can't count on students having devices. So that's the impediment there.
Yeah, you go.
I think just the other piece of elementary, with most of it actually, is often what's more disruptive than a snow day is anticipation of a snow day. So the number of times they think there's going to be a big storm and isn't, and has people scrambling to make changes, and then there's a school day. So it would become a real challenge if it was like, okay, it looks like a snow day tomorrow, take all this stuff home. It isn't a snow day, bring it all back, and then there's another storm. And teachers then will be preparing in the moment for like, is this going to be big snow? So I think what we've really talked about was with our younger children, a lot of their learning is around practicing skills that they're in the midst of acquiring. And so it really is around sort of timely practice of the skills. So we do think it's still relevant and worthwhile, but it wouldn't be like, okay, we're going to continue our reading lesson from today, because it's just would be so difficult to predict. But it would be what we believe would be of value, because it'd be related to, related to where they're at, and predominantly individually as well as part of a class.
So it's slightly different at the high school because something we carried forward from last year is that all classes are required to use Google Classroom now, and the vast majority of our teachers use that as a communication tool every day. So I would imagine that that ours would be a continuation of the lesson. It would be something that was posted the night before. The only thing that would get in the way of that is internet access and power outages, and today was a great example. You know, it was only a small percentage of our students who lost power, where the vast majority had power, and that was the same for the staff. And so, but for the most part, ours would be a continuation of what they're doing from their class, because our students are so used to checking Google Classroom for what they need to do. So, and then because of the synchronous practices last year, our students are really good about, it's very easy. We put a Google Meet link in the Google Classroom, and then they could click on there and access their teacher. That's what we're doing for quarantine students right now. They have a link where they can check in with an ed tech, and so it's something that's familiar to our kids at the high school.
Which at the middle school, we anticipate a similar scenario, not necessarily the synchronous, but with the Google Classroom. And I know that we had talked across FMS and DCS in terms of, you know, lessons would be posted for that particular day, and it would be in line with the learning they've been doing.
Anybody else? Any questions? No? Okay. All right, then we'll have a vote. All those in favor? I don't think you have a motion. Oh, sorry, I did a motion. Oh, I didn't get it. Okay, sorry. Did a motion. Vali passed the motion and Maura seconded? Okay, that's all right. So, okay, all those in favor? Great, unanimous approved. Thank you. Okay.
And just a big thank you to our principals that worked on that presentation, and I'm not sure that you're all aware, but it's October is like Recognize Your Principal Month, and I just want to take a moment to say that in RSU 5 we are super fortunate to have the principals that we have. They are beyond dedicated and are a just tremendous asset to RSU 5. So thank you. I want to thank them publicly for their work day in and day out.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, guys.
And their prize is they don't have to stay for my superintendent report.
Okay. All right, we're going to move into public comment. Do we have anybody interested in public comment this evening? We ask you to come to the podium and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Okay, I think we're good. All right, so we're going to go to number 8, reports from the superintendent. Oh, sorry, we got to go back?
No, you're right. I'm throwing you off.
I'm actually doing it right this time, and everybody's making me. It's all right. Okay, all right. So, report from the superintendent.
Thank you. Cynthia and I are trying to keep you on your toes, Beth. So my most recent COVID update is that we are now at 44 confirmed cases. Last year, for comparison, in October we had 1 case, and thus far we have 15 cases in October. So you can see that we continue to struggle with the amount of cases that we have. We've had 7 cases in the past 14 days. We do now have pool testing set up in all of our pre-K to 8 classroom schools, and currently 74% of our eligible families at the elementary schools are opting into pool testing, which is wonderful. At Freeport Middle School, we have 32% of our students participating, and they started this week with that. And then at the high school, we're beginning next week, and currently, as of today, we have 8% of our students signed up. But I will tell you, in all of the other schools that have already rolled it out, that just continues to increase. So I expect that percent to also go up at the high school. We're also hoping to partner with Mid-Coast Medical and Freeport Community Services on September the 18th with the vaccine clinic for our younger students. September. Oh, did I say? I said, yeah. No. Yes, thank you. November. November 18th with the vaccine clinic. This, of course, is contingent upon the final approval of the vaccine. So we don't have any other details other than that, just wanted to have it on your radar. And so as soon as it's finalized, we'll communicate that widely, and we hope to have a good turnout. Our staff is 95% vaccinated, and we continue to wait for the guidance on the logistics about requiring employees who are not vaccinated to test weekly. We still have not filled all of our staff openings, which is highly unusual at this time of the year. We're still needing a math strategist at the elementary and secondary level. We need 2 bus drivers still, and luckily we've been able to fill some of our ed tech positions, but we're still in need of 2 more. And anyone who's willing to sub in any capacity, we want you. We've got principals who are covering classes on a regular basis, and that's not ideal. The board's next opportunity for professional development is here at PES on Friday, November the 19th. You will be seeing student voice in action. The 3rd graders will lead an all-school assembly. So that will be from 9:30 to 10. On the equity update, you've heard a lot tonight, so I'll kind of skip over some of this, but our DEI committee will be meeting again on November the 9th. Cynthia, Charlie, Jen, and I had a meeting on the disaggregated data that the consultant sent us. We're finding some errors, not on their part so much, but just, I think, the way we code our data. And so we're needing to meet with Paula Roberts, our data specialist, and we're probably going to be sending some of the data back to them to look at again once we feel like we've given them accurate data. In the interim, we've also sent them all of our scorecards, the academic achievement, and so they're currently looking at that. You heard a lot tonight about the PD that's been going on around the Integrative Inquiry and the individual coaching that's taking place for those staff members, and then they will in turn train the rest of the staff. Sports update. We have 3 teams in the playoffs tonight. The boys soccer is in their quarterfinals at Falmouth against Greeley tonight at 8. I have not heard how our other teams have done, but the girls field hockey played at Yarmouth at 5, and then the girls soccer, they were at Yarmouth at 7. Football is in the quarterfinals, and we're playing this Friday here at home. The cross country is running in the state championship at Belfast on Saturday. The overall golf team finished in 6th place. We feel like we've had just a wonderful, successful fall sports season. But I also wanted to mention, because we did the social emotional workshop tonight, that, you know, playing a sport is not just about winning. And recently our cheerleaders at the high school partnered with the football players, and they painted posters for our younger boys football teams, and they also made them goodie bags to give to the younger teams during their last regular home games. Our field hockey at the middle school, they washed windows at the Senior Oak Leaf Terrace and the Brookside Village resident communities. And I think these are just some examples that it's not just about learning a sport, but we're also, through the sports, trying to teach our students to be kind, compassionate, and giving human beings. So I'm really proud of those two particular teams for their community service. The MSMA Fall Conference begins tomorrow. There are lots of good offerings. The conference will be held via Zoom again. I, for one, I think I'm ready to go back to in-person conferences. Cynthia and I were on a Zoom conference all day, and she said to me before the board meeting, "Is your neck bothering you?" And I said, "Yes, it is. It's just a lot of screen time." So I'm hopeful that we'll be back in person next year. I have three resignations to report tonight. Jack Horgan, a computer tech with our tech team at Freeport Middle School, has resigned. Stephanie Lemieux, the administrative assistant for instructional support, has resigned. And Emily Holland, Laugh and Learn preschool teacher. And lastly, I feel like we have a resignation from Jeremy and Lindsay. And so, you know, Lindsay, I really want to thank you for your work on the past, for these 2+ years that you've served. And through the pandemic, you pushed us to continue to think about the social, emotional well-being of every one of our kids. And I just can't thank you enough for this advocacy and for your contributions to the policy committee. Cynthia said you have just been stellar on that committee. And your part in the creation of our DEI committee, ensuring that we are making sure that all of our kids are feeling safe and welcome. So thank you. You'll be missed here on the board. And Jeremy, 6 years to service on the board, and you're someone who does not speak often, but when you do, I listen carefully, as your comments always cause me to reflect and think about how we can improve here in RSU 5. You've worked on the safety committee, your work on the finance committee, specifically the endless hours that you spent on the cost sharing formula. You know, I just really can't thank you enough for that. And I know that one of your plans is to possibly go back to school and become a learner again. And I know that you're going to be at the top of your class because we have witnessed your thoughtful reflection and deliberation. So thank you for your service to the board. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. All right, so we will move on to, I'm sorry, Valley, go ahead.
Sorry, Becky, to bring you back. Question about the vaccine clinic. This would be for the 12 and under, so it would be the smaller dose?
Yes.
That the clinic will be for. Okay, so we're not doing any more clinics for ages 12 and over. It's just for the younger kids now.
Yeah, we don't have any of that planned, just because I think that that's readily accessible at this point.
I agree. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Maddie.
I wanted to thank you for sharing about the cheer team and football team and the field hockey team, I think you said. That is just stellar. I mean, I think our district has a reputation in athletics for being good sports, lots of good sportsmanship awards, and I think that's a great example of maybe where that comes from. But you know, there are communities in the news for some really difficult things in athletics, and this kind of activity where you have older athletes coming down and spending time with our younger athletes is huge, because it helps, it's not only great for the little kids, but it helps remind the older kids how much they're looked up to. So I'm thank you for sharing that with us, and I hope that more coaches will take the initiative to do more of that, and we'll keep hearing more and more about these opportunities.
Okay, anybody else? All right, we will move on then to 9B, which is Lisa Demick, for the Pownell Elementary Goal Review.
Sorry, Beth, but Rick is not doing the finance?
He did it already.
Yeah. Okay, I have some questions. I'll ask later. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I'll try and put some cohesive thoughts together. The good news is that a lot of what you saw tonight already, has hit the highlights of some of my goal work. So I'll be able to kind of do the Reader's Digest version. So one of the things I'll direct you to is I think if we start with this year, the 21-22 goal document, I'll be able to speak to the work we did last year by sort of looking forward, and I think that will save us some work. I want to thank you personally for the advocacy and support you gave our teachers last year in giving time back in that unprecedented year. I have to tell you, I hear often from our staff when they're facing the challenging situations, and quite frankly, this year is still very challenging. They feel so supported by you as a board, so thank you so much for that. So a lot of what happened with my goals last year was that they were put on hold so that we could really kind of give back some of that time. And they either became baseline for this year or they got moved to this year. So at Pownell we have a theme for the year, the ABCs of Pownell, and that's achieve, belong, and contribute. And that really drives the goals that we have this year. And I think you've gotten a good flavor for how, you really need to belong, in order to be able to achieve. I think it's also great examples with that middle school example of the importance to kids' mental health around learning to contribute, right? It's not just what they're getting. It's about them learning to kind of give back. So I'll start with A, achieve. Last year we set a goal that was really focused on growth in literacy and math, recognizing that kids were, I'm going to do it now, that kids were coming back from a gap, and we really wanted to see everyone grow, make a year's worth of growth in a year's time. So it set a goal of 65% growth last year in both reading and math. And I'm happy to say that in math we were able to achieve that. We actually had 80% growth on the NWEA in our 3rd through 5th grade. And in literacy, on the benchmark assessment system that we have throughout, we also were able to exceed our target. But that's not really the whole story, because when we disaggregated the data, our older students were able to catch up much more quickly than our younger students. And when you look at the data, when you kind of cut the data with primary and intermediate, it really did show that we want to kind of focus more on ways to support those younger learners. I also want to bring back this year looking at how our kids are doing based on our achievement benchmarks. Last year we really focused all on growth, like let's focus on what we can kind of control, but we really want to be keeping an eye on how many kids we're getting to hit the high targets that we've set. So you'll see both an achievement target and a growth target when we look at the work that we're doing this year. I want to thank you for the additional 2/10 math RTI support. This will be the first year in Pownell that all grade levels can have access to extra math RTI. And we really want to see that focus more on some of our younger students so we can close the gaps more quickly. In the past, it has been more around sort of kids that were sort of the farthest away from the benchmark that were getting that support, and we finally feel like we now have the right amount of support to give some just-in-time work. Thanks to our COVID funds, we've also been able to add some booster club support, which is morning, sort of small targets, 6-week intervention cycles that happen outside the school day in literacy and math. And so we're hoping that helps us to really accelerate the growth as well. In literacy, one of the things that we've done, you've heard from many of the schools around intervention blocks or flex blocks or lift blocks. We've rebranded ours Portfolio Workshop around the idea that everyone deserves quality small group instruction. And we've tightly aligned our professional learning communities to that portfolio workshop work, so that it's really about kind of looking at data in real time, making small groups kind of a all hands on deck, all abilities. It was starting to feel like kids who needed sort of RTI support were getting support in that time, but then it was kind of developing into more of a like glorified study hall for the other kids. And so we're really happy with how tightly we're tying the PLC work with that, so that it can be about grouping and regrouping kids at all ability levels. And what the teachers are reporting is not only is that helping them with the intervention time, but they're finding that time for really looking at information and kind of planning together with the literacy strategist, with myself, with the RTI teacher, is that it's also increasing the quality of the small group work that they're able to do during the reading workshop and their writing workshop time. So we're excited that we should be able to hit that 75% mark. And I really think in this district, with the student population and the quality of resources we have, we should at least be seeing 75% of our kids hitting the targets on those assessments. And then goal 2 and goal 3 are about the belong and the contribute. I'm going to kind of quickly go through those. The second goal is really around responsive classroom. 2019-20 was our first sort of formal year of spending time, doing responsive classroom as a whole building. We were afforded the opportunity to have a consultant come here right before the pandemic, around February, to say how we were doing with the incorporation of the practices. And she was very complimentary, but also said it's really about moving beyond the morning meeting and the first 6 weeks of school to really seeing that be part of everything you do. And Emily did a beautiful job. I don't need to go into that, but our goal for this year is really to work together as a building team to practice those skills, because it's one thing to sort of learn about them. It's another thing to really sort of see your skill level grow in being able to do interactive learning structures, or in being able to problem solve effectively. And so this year it's really about looking at video, having a book study, and thinking about our teacher language together as a collaborative, so that we can really see that become a natural part of what we do. So that's kind of where we're going with the responsive classroom work. The third goal is around our diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I would say that last year I'd characterize our work as listening to learn. And I think sort of the general consensus was, wow, there was a lot we didn't know, right? And so, we did a lot of the learning that you see. I think one thing to feel really proud of is how the work spreads in this district to where, you see Connor talking about the professional development. That's also the professional development our teachers have had, an opportunity for. And I often speak in Pownell about how lucky we are to sort of have this sweet little, very family-oriented school, but have the sophisticated resources of a 3-town district. I really feel as though this community benefits from that and then gives back to, the other two as well. So we did that professional development, and the big sort of shift that hasn't really been talked about that we want to do is to have more tools to examine our practices from a point of view of, different groups that may not necessarily have been represented. So, for example, last year our specialists started with looking at which musicians are they highlighting, what's the balance, and what's the diversity that they're bringing to who they're bringing to the kids. David Whiting did the same thing with artists. What's his cycle of artists, and then a simple practice of having a photograph of that person so that kids are seeing that while they may have all white teachers in their building, they're still seeing the celebration and the accomplishments of a wider variety of folks. So, there are sometimes those simple practices that are very much linked to what I call like the universal design for learning around, that started with architecture where, it was really important for a wheelchair to have a curb cut out, but so many more people than the person who needs the curb cut out with a wheelchair benefits from that. And so really looking as a community at ways that we can embrace practices that help us, and looking at our data so that we're kind of questioning, in our library, do we have a wide representation? Or I've kind of been taking sort of an old school approach to our discipline where I have a behavior book, and so a shift to Power School so that we can really sort of disaggregate the data around, are boys more likely to be, given office referrals than girls? Or, what's the representation and who might not be accessing, chess club? I feel very fortunate that our parent-teacher organization really takes equity seriously. So partnering with them around ways to make sure that after-school offerings don't come with a fee. You've done some great work around field trips. We're also choosing, what cultural experiences might help students to have more opportunities that maybe they wouldn't have been afforded. And how can we do that in a way that doesn't create a cost barrier for folks? Simple things like this summer providing transportation with our summer school tutoring made it so that some students who had qualified for support but couldn't attend, were able to do so this year. So I really think sort of our DEI work is around, what are those tools that help us constantly to kind of monitor sort of business as usual and kind of thinking about ways to make sure that we're providing as rich and level of a playing field as we can. So that's kind of my goals as in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any specific questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Lisa. It's wonderful to hear all the good stuff happening. But okay, does anybody have any questions? I don't know. Looks like you're getting off easy tonight.
Well, I said, they did so much of my work by doing the presentation. It was really good time. I was worried about the time, but I'm like, okay, that's really going to pay off. So,
all right. Well, it looks. I'm sorry. I guess I jumped the gun, Valley.
It's not a question. It's just utter admiration of everything you guys are doing. So what you just said is just amazing.
Oh, thanks.
Keep it up. It's great.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I have a great
so
team.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Okay, so we will move on to board comments and committee reports. So we have a board information exchange and agenda requests. Do we have Valley?
I would like to request that the policy committee look at writing a policy on student memorials for our district. Based on the conversation we had and all the information that Becky sent to us, I think it's appropriate to engage in that process.
Okay. Maddie?
I just wanted to report on the opportunity to be at the high school today. Thank you for that opportunity. Michelle Richardson and I were there. And it was similar to last year, although last year I think that opportunity was at various schools at different times, but it was just the high school today. So we had period 3-4, and Jen Gulko provided us with a sheet which classrooms were having sort of active teaching. So we basically just circled the building, probably spent about 5 minutes in a bunch of different classrooms. It was really nice. It was nice to see kids working and engaging. It felt to me like, I think I shared last year that observing the synchronous learning, it felt like kids were not as engaged last year, and it was just nice to see them shoulder to shoulder, talking, well masked, but sort of a bit more back to normal, it felt like to me. And we even got to stop into one teacher's classroom who saw us coming by, and she wasn't teaching at the time, got to get some feedback from her, and she's echoed what Lisa had said, which is that yeah, it's a lot better this year, but it's not as easy as it was before. Not that it was ever easy, but it's still tough. There's still a learning curve happening. But anyway, it's great. I always welcome the opportunity to get into the schools, so look forward to more of those.
Great, thank you. Jill?
I just want to report that I did log in and vote as we discussed in the MSBA 2021 Delegate Assembly. It was a short 4-hour endeavor, but it's lovely that they can do it on Zoom.
Thank you very much. Oh, Mara? Yeah.
Sorry if this is too much of an ask, but how did, I didn't stay the whole time, I'll admit. How did the voting turn out? Did they all pass?
Yes, they all passed, and there tended to be more discussion as the morning went on. The more heated was about the 2 items that we had a lot of discussion on the attendance rate and also the voting on whether teachers should strike or not. But yeah, they all passed.
Great. Thank you for asking that. I didn't want to put you on the spot in case you didn't write down which one was which. Okay. Okay, then we'll move on to Finance Committee, which is me, I guess, now. So I took over for Jeremy. So I just am reporting out on the minutes for, it looks like 2 meetings here. We have from October 8th, when Jeremy was still chair, but the next meeting is when I became chair. So, and you can obviously read through and see that Rick had let us know about a budgeting error. If there are specific questions about that, I'm gonna ask you to potentially ask Becky, because I do not remember all the details around what that budgeting error was, but he assured us that everything is going to be monitored and has been well taken care of. And we also were discussing about the, assigning the proper cost center numbers to make sure everything is properly labeled and organized going forward with the budget. And yeah, so then the next meeting was just basically going over the status of the budget, and I guess the biggest thing was that we agreed to swing by the central office to sign the warrants instead of having Rick cart them all to the meeting. So we decided on that. So that's about it. Anybody have any questions? Yes. Oops, Maddie, sorry.
I don't know if this is a question for the committee or for Becky, but I'm just wondering if there's an update on consultant for the cost sharing?
There's not really an update on that yet, but it's at the top of my list.
Ollie? And I had a question about the error that was found in the budget. So my understanding from what you guys reported here is that we are 200,000 less appropriated than we should have. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay.
What happened is that Rick, well, we all collaborate on the budget, but he enters the salaries, things like the supplies and the equipment. The other principals and directors enter directly into the budget. And then, of course, we have budget reviews and everything with all of us. But what happened was he had a misunderstanding about the people who serve as bus drivers and custodians. So that he budgeted them for the school year rather than all year.
Oh.
So that's where the error came, and that resulted in a $200,000 shortage.
Okay. So the next question is, where are those 200,000 going to come from? What article is going to suffer as a result of this?
Well, I would think that primarily based upon my discussions with him, that a lot of that will come from turnover savings in the salary lines from people who have retired. You know, we always budget them at a certain level. So it'll still be around the salaries. And obviously, you've heard me talking every meeting that we're still not fully staffed. So between the change in staff and the staff we haven't been able to fill, I think it'll still be in the salary line. But it's just that those lines, if we were fully staffed and no one retired or left, we would be about $200,000 short.
Well, the silver lining of not having enough people.
Any other questions on that? Okay. All right, we'll move to 10C, the Policy Committee, and Candy.
Okay, and it has to do mainly with tonight's subject. We worked on the student wellness policy, which is a lengthy policy, and there was a lot of discussion about adding social emotional wellness to the policy, which had not been there before, and there was input from the wellness committee, and we still have some work to do. So that's going back to next Friday, November 5th's meeting, and the 3 that you see there on free and reduced food services and procedures and the use of cell phones will also be going back to next Friday's meeting. So that's about it.
All right, thank you, Candy. Maddie, you have a question?
I guess this is maybe a question for Cynthia. With Volley's request that we write a new policy, how would we go about that? Is that something that needs to be moved and voted on by the board, or is that something that the committee would then look for sample policy, or how do we approach her request?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of research that has to happen prior to, you know, do other districts have such a policy? Calling Drummond Woodson's or MSMA to see if they have a sample policy, or how is it handled in other districts? Maybe it's not a policy, maybe it's a procedure, and so on. So there'll be a little research and digging that would happen prior to that work.
Yep. Can I just ask a clarifying question? Do you mean prior to the policy committee doing the work, or prior? So I guess for a organizational standpoint, like, do we need to give the policy committee, like, do we need to vote as a board to give the policy committee the charge to look at that?
Well, Becky, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
I think it probably is worth seeing that, you know, what Valley is requesting is that the majority of the board that is wanting that done. But I think you can also, if you'd like, we can have before, I don't think it hurts for Cynthia just to do some preliminary quick work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I mean, obviously it's not a required policy, right? Or we'd already have it. But she can do a quick call to MSMA to say, do you have a sample policy? That's telling in and of itself. And then, you know, she can do a little digging and then maybe report back to the board.
Okay, so then you could do a little research, come back to the board, and then we should decide as a board if we want to send it to policy.
I think that would be my recommendation. What do you think, Candy?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's, we were talking about, yeah, your suggestion, Valerie, okay.
Okay, so then we'll move on to policy review. And should I read the motion to start us off?
That'd be great.
Okay. So could I have a consideration and approval of second read for the following policies? One, JLCB, which is immunization of students. 2 is JLCC, communicable and infectious diseases. Volley motion and Jill second. Thank you.
Great, thank you. This is second read, and so the changes that were discussed at the prior meeting where we had policy was the end of the last month, were made. If you look at page 2 of immunizations of students, section B, we added Becky's request for to put in a state of Maine licensed physician, nurse practitioner, or physician's assistant. That's one of the ways that the non-immunized students shall not be permitted to attend unless they have the following. And so if one of those individuals in their professional development deems that it's against one of the, that the immunization against one or more of the diseases may be medically inadvisable. And then the other thing was the next paragraph down, it starts effective September 1, we pulled that out to the margin because it wasn't appropriate. So those are the only upgrades to that one. And then the next policy, we just combined those paragraphs. There was, the fourth paragraph down was split in two, making it really awkward. It didn't make sense, and they were combined together. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Anybody have any questions, comments? No? Okay. All right, I guess we can have the vote. So, all those in favor? Great, none opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Okay, and we have no personnel, so we are back to a public comment, and it looks like we have no one here. So I would take a motion to adjourn. All right, Lindsay and Jeremy, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much.